could you tell us a little bit more about the highlights of being Black and also the lowlights of being Black, if there are
Yeah.
any kind of specific highlights or lowlights?
Yeah. So one of the highlights of being Black is anytime athletics comes up, anytime performance comes up, and one way more subtle that's missed is simply because I was a military brat. So I had the opportunity of living in Germany. I've had the opportunity of living across Washington State and a little bit of North Carolina and around Michigan. Because I had that vast experience where I'm interacting with different cultures, different speech patterns, and things of that nature. One of the highlights is because I comfortably articulate myself, I'm sometimes awarded respect as a result of that. So it is a highlight, although it has an underlying sadness to it, but it's a highlight because I don't necessarily speak with slang, at least when I'm in a public sector or interacting. I know how to, as we call it, the low light code switch. And what I mean by code switch is, unfortunately, I don't get to be me at all times. Now, I've done a better job as an individual because I've tried to round myself intentionally around that. But the conversation I have with my son will be different than the conversation I have with you. So one of the challenges is knowing when to do that and being comfortable in your own skin without feeling like you have to compromise or become someone else. I'm not talking about the difference between whether or not I should use profanity in this conversation. I'm talking about the difference between, okay, what word is going to be the best word so I'm not looked down upon? Or do I stay quiet because the conversation is above me? So it's things like that. But let me give you another low light. I have a low light now. So growing up in Seattle, Washington State, this is a plus, but I'll give you the other side. I remember I was probably 16, 17 years old with a buddy who's a little bit older than me. We're riding around in this truck and we're playing. That's the time you had big speaker subwoofers in the back and you're letting it rock. And so we take a nice drive from Tacoma to Seattle. We're in downtown Seattle. We're having a great drive. Evening time. Sound is bouncing off of buildings. It just sounds cool. I'm a teenager. I'm like, yeah, we're riding. So we get pulled over. And the officer says, noise violation, you're too loud. Let me see your registration. Now, okay, no problem. Let me go in the glove box, get the registration. I go in the glove box to get the registration. There's a gun. Now, I didn't know there was a gun in the glove box. But I trusted this guy, and he was pretty cool. Fortunately, well, there's a gun. Officer sees the gun. On both sides of the car, guns are drawn to our head. Period. I'm nervous as ever because I don't even know. In fact, I told my mom this the other day. She didn't even know I was gone that day and that I took this ride or that this incident ever happened. But let me tell you what happened next. Because he had a legal firearm with paperwork, the officer said, take your time, show us the paperwork. He showed the paperwork. Guns went away. They said, man, turn the music down. But next time, if you have a firearm in the vehicle, tell us before we come up so we don't have to panic. I was fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the low light. My brother, who was stopped by an officer in South Carolina, that particular officer was out for a noise violation. Except not my brother. Actually, I take that back. He was out for a violation. There was a Caucasian male who was apparently showing himself to children.
Has a what himself to children?
Revealing himself to children.
Oh, I see.
He was a nudist,
wow.
or whatever the proper term is. My brother gets home in his military uniform, and the officer pulls him over. He's like, officer, what's the problem? He says, I received a noise violation, which is not actually accurate according to the records. Long story short, my brother was beat up, abused. His wife at that time came out, and she was beat up, abused, and handcuffed as well. All the evidence in the phone, taken away, everything for a noise violation. So the other low light behind that is, so this is why I say I can only really speak from Marquese's perspective, because remember, I'm the kid who tries to look through the positive lens, keep my nose clean, so to speak, as I was raised to think and believe. I had my incident with the officers in Seattle. Thankfully, that went well. Mm-hmm. My brother had his incident, but here's what happened. My brother called me. I don't even remember when, how soon after, but I can tell you this. It took me, and this is a low light, probably 2 or 3 years before I actually believed it was even a real thing and that he didn't actually cause it himself.
Hmm.
Now, I share that to say that's low because I didn't even believe my own family
Hmm.
because I was so blinded by what happens in America that I thought my brother definitely did something to cause that to happen.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened.
Hmm.
Here's the interesting thing about that situation. We cried and talked because I had to apologize. I didn't realize how blinded I was. But what made me open my eyes is that the same officer that assaulted him and his wife at the time is the same officer, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago in South Carolina. He took an African American girl. He was assigned to school duty. He took an African American girl. He snatched her out of her desk and body slammed her, and that was on video and on the news. It's the exact same officer. It broke me because I realized I'm living in a fantasy. I've tried to avoid the realities that many people have experienced by, unquote, keeping my nose clean, but I just happen to be in more fortunate circumstances than they. But the reality is, my own very baby brother was abused and assaulted by the police. And that's a low light because I didn't even believe him
Yeah.
for several years.